Question 11. We have a frequency table to do with the length of time that 100 people spent in a coffee shop. So 4 people spent between 0 and 20 minutes, for example. 12 people spent between 80 and 100 minutes, so on and so forth. Complete the cumulative frequency table. So cumulative frequency table, or cumulative frequency, is the accumulation of frequencies, the accumulation of your frequencies, and which can also be shown by what we have here that I've circled. So the 0 to 20, which had 4, there are still only 4 people that were between 0 and 20. But then when we go up, the 20 to 40 group is considered here along with the green group. So you end up with this 4, and you end up with this, this 12, and both of those together make 16 for the cumulative frequency. So you're basically accumulating frequencies as you go down the table, because every time your group gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you're including the ones from before. So we end up with 16 plus 26 to give us 42. We end up with 42 plus 42 to give us 84. 84 plus 12 will give us 96. And 96 plus 4 will give us 100. It's worth noting that whenever you get to the end of a cumulative frequency table, what you have here should always match the total frequency, because by the time you get to the end, the 0 to 120 minutes accounts for everybody that was asked the length of time or measured, let's say, and there were 100 people that were there. So that's a clue that you've kind of done this right when you end up with the total at the end like that. So that's a cumulative frequency table. Then you're asked to sketch the graph. So one thing you've got to be careful with the graph is that when you plot your coordinates, you are interested in the upper end of the groups. So the idea is you're interested in up to 20 minutes, up to 40 minutes, so on and so forth. And then, of course, by the time you get to the end, it's up to 120. So the x-coordinates that we're interested in here on this graph are going to be in line like so. If you make a mistake and end up doing the midpoints instead, your graph is going to end up sort of looking a little strange where there's this gap at the end. And if you do something crazy like doing the midpoints of these, then what you're going to end up with is that your graph will end up becoming half of the space that you've got. This big clue, if you've got a big gap like that at the end, you will have made this mistake. So the x-coordinates are going to be along 20, 40, so on and so forth. Now all we've got to do is plot our y-coordinates there. So these are the x's. These here will be the y's. So I'll leave that back. So we have a 20, 4, which the scale here is there's 10 squares up to 20. So 5 squares up to 10, which means 4 is going to be there. So our first point, 20, 4. We then have 40, 16. Will be there. 60, 42, which is here. 80, 84, which is here. 100, 96, which is there. And then we have 120, 100. That is us plotted at all the points, which will get us 1 mark. The next part, we have to sketch our cumulative frequency graph, which will end up being an S-shaped curve. Now you can technically join the dots here with a ruler, and that will be perfectly acceptable in terms of getting full marks. But technically it should be a smooth curve like this. You do not have to join it up to the origin, but technically you will have that there. You don't get any marks for it. The full marks you'll get for this question will be 1 for the points and 1 for the curve, right? But you don't have to have that bit there, okay? And you'll never need it for what's to come in questions. So that's us drawn cumulative frequency graph. Part C, use your estimate to find, use your graph to find an estimate for the lower quartile. So when we're dealing with medians or quartiles, we're interested in the position of our values. So we're going to be looking down the scale on the left. A quarter of 100 is 25. So where I'm going to be looking here, if this is 20 and this is 30, then my 25, just zooming in here, is going to be halfway between 26 and 24, which means that as I go along here, and of course I would use a ruler, I'm going to look for the graph there. Now, technically you got this little bit of wiggle room, like if I went down there, what I went down there, you're probably going to be right, or within the range. In terms of what I've got here, this value is what my graph is giving me, which I'm going to have 49. So you'll probably have a range of somewhere between like 46 and 50, something like that. It really depends on how you've drawn your curve. So 49 would be a good estimate for the lower quartile, given what I've drawn here. Quite a lot of the time, even if the mark scheme is a little different from what you've got, as long as your curve or your graph looks okay and you've used it to get a value, you're going to get the follow-through marks for that, even if you end up being a little wide of the range. So that's the lower quartile. Part D, use your graph to find an estimate. Again, you've got a little bit of wiggle room of the number of people who spent longer than 70 minutes in the coffee shop. So 70 minutes, we're going to be interested in here. That there is 70 minutes. So just zooming in, we are going to go up to, should have probably picked a different color here, but we're going to go up to our graph, hitting it there. Let's go along there. So based on that, that value there is 66. So using my graph there, that's shown that up to 70 minutes, there were 66 people who spent up to 70 minutes. So because of the fact that it's saying spent longer, we're actually interested in how many people were above the 66. So we take that 66 away from 100, and we're going to end up with 34 is our estimate. Again, whether or not your numbers match or are close to what they've got in the mark scheme, as long as your graph and the evidence of you drawing lines like this justify your value, then you're going to get the marks for that. And that's us. Done.